Hey guys, Caley Chelios here with Bryan Burns for a very socially distanced breakdown of what training camp looked like today. First day of training camp at Amalie Arena. Bryan, you were there. You got to see the practices, hear from the coaches, players, and the first time in a very long time you've been able to go to the arena and that we've been able to see some hockey. So what was it like today? Can you kind of take us through day one of training camp for the Lightning?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it felt great because, for the last 4 months, I've been, working from home. It's kind of like Groundhog Day. You wake up, you get a cup of coffee, do some chores, and you sit down at the laptop at the same spot every day. And it feels monotonous and you don't really feel like you're getting anywhere. It doesn't feel like a normal work day. So to be able to go back into the arena, to even to feel the chill in the air, like that, to me was one of the most noticeable things, because it's been so hot and humid here in Tampa for the last 2 months or so. Like, to actually go in and feel cold for a little bit, that was a pretty cool change. To hear the Zamboni like scraping the ice and whirring around there, that was kind of cool to hear. To hear pucks hitting the back of the glass, like those are just really cool sounds that we haven't heard for over 4 months now. So it was good to be back. It was good to be back in the arena to see the guys skating. Everybody seemed to be in really good spirits. The Lightning, they had the first day of camp was, and John Cooper talked about this on his Zoom call afterward, that the first day is just kind of everybody orienting themselves, getting caught back up, getting their legs underneath of them. Nothing like too intense on the first day, and just kind of amping up each day to try to ratchet up the intensity, but doing it safe, like not trying to go all out on the first day and kind of easing into it. And that's kind of what we saw on the first day. They've broken up the team, the 33-man roster, into two different groups. So we saw 16 guys out there for the first session from 10 to 11. Then we saw a second session from 12:30 to 1:30 with the other half of the team. And a lot of just kind of like 2-on-1 drills, 2-on-2, a lot of passing drills, no real, nothing contact oriented, no like 4-on-4, 5-on-5, anything like that. We did see at the end of each session, we saw a little mini game, which the guys like to play, or they get the nets up to the both blue lines, and a little 3-on-3 action with both goalies in the net. But it felt a lot like, kind of like an opening day of training camp, for a preseason. It kind of had that feel to it, maybe just not as many sessions, because at that point you're talking about like 65 different people and you spread it out over 3 different sessions. This was like half of that spread out over 2 sessions.
Yeah, a lot to juggle in terms of player safety, but also trying to get them ready for a new format and taking guys who are kind of in their peak shape, peak performance, and now inviting them back in. There's no fitness tests allowed in phase 3, but like you said, trying to just get their legs going a little bit in day 1, I'm sure. How was the safety, or kind of, I know you said that guys seem really enthusiastic to be back at the arena, back skating. I'm sure it's been fun for them too, even without media, just being back in the arena with the coaching staff and with each other. But, how was the safety protocol? How did players or John Cooper kind of feel about the way, everything from the day-to-day is going right now at the arena, for the players to be able to come back and do it safely, and for the media to be able to be there and be present covering?
Yeah, a couple of the guys, we talked to Tyler Johnson, we talked to Alex Killorn after their sessions were over, kind of asked them about, just kind of how it felt, if it felt weird, the way things were. And they said it does feel a little weird. You're having your meetings in the locker room, and everybody's distance. It's not the same as like being, shoulder to shoulder in your locker room stall. Everybody has masks on when they're back in the facility. Things like that. Like, those are little things that we've all kind of gotten used to at this point, but it still feels weird. It doesn't exactly feel like, it used to, or how it felt like when you would normally go into a training camp. You obviously wouldn't have those situations where you're having to wear a mask pretty much all the time, like even when you go in and out of the facility. Temperature checks are still going on. They have to do that each day from their home. even before they get to the rink. And then once they get to the rink, they're getting their temperature checked. And we in the media, we're kind of following those same protocols as well. Like even before we can go into the arena, we have to get our temperature checked and make sure we're in that appropriate range. Media have to keep their mask on at all times. Even though we're pretty far away from where the players are, they had us set up in sections 118 through 120 in the last 5 rows of those sections. So we're pretty far away from the ice and from being in any kind of contact with the players. We're going in a different entrance from the players. There's no real chance for any media to even like cross paths with a player just accidentally, the way they have us set up. And then even amongst the media group, everybody's socially distanced. They have tables set up for people to work at, but they're, spaced far apart. And for their part, the media did a good job too. Everybody's coming in wearing their mask. Everybody's like going into the sections and nobody's sitting right on top of one another. Everybody's, making sure there's like 4 or 5 seats in between them and the next media member. So it was pretty good. I mean, this is kind of, everybody talks about the new normal. I mean, I think people have gotten used to this by now, and we just kind of know what the routine is at this point.
Yeah, it's such a huge shift, as you're talking about, from what we're used to seeing, especially in the playoffs. Players, for the most part, too, media on top of each other, flying around the country, and players going to dinners together, going to hotels together. Everything's kind of this team, big group effort. Just thinking about, obviously, a big challenge for Julian Brisebois and John Cooper will be kind of trying to replicate that same intensity and compete level that they had, at March 12th. They're not going to be able to do it in training camp, but how much harder that's going to be when you can't really build that chemistry off the ice, and John Cooper's obviously talked about the importance of bonding and the experiences that these teams have going into the playoffs together. It's going to be way different, obviously, with the bubble and their inability to really spend time together outside the arena. But having said that, looking back at the end of the regular season, you got to see the lines today. It looked like we saw something fairly similar to what we saw at the end of the regular season, that top line with Kucherov and Point. You got to see Steven Stamkos today on the ice. Although he sustained a new injury, he was a full participant. Carter Verhaeghe took a spot on that top line with Point and Kucherov. But as far as the lines go, did you kind of see what you expected to see, and what did John Cooper kind of have on the board for them today? And some of the new faces we're seeing too, Witkowski, Jamel Smith, and Cal Foote, the first-round pick, who seems kind of like an exciting player to watch here too at training camp.
Yeah, lines are pretty similar to what we thought we might see, except for that top line. Since Stamkos is out, we saw Carter Verhaeghe in his spots. Was Verhaeghe, Point, Kucherov, and I got to think Verhaeghe's just kind of a placeholder right now until Stamkos is ready to get back. And like you said, we saw Stamkos in between the 2 sessions while Zamboni was still on the ice, kind of cleaning things up from the first session. He came out with Mikey Poirier out on the bench and did a few turns, and then went and took some shots once the Zamboni came off the ice. So it's good to see that it doesn't really look like it's anything serious at all for Stamkos. And John Cooper talked afterwards that he just expects him to miss a practice or 2, but that he should be fine for when the team goes up to Toronto and plays actual games. It's not a rush right now to get him back. It's more just trying to make sure he's ready, so when they do get up to Toronto and they do start to play games, that he's ready to go 100% at that point. And then the other lines, I mean, you look at some of these lines and they're pretty strong when you look at them. The first session had Palat, Cirelli, and Killorn. That's a really tough line to have to go up against. Your third line was a couple of the newcomers with Blake Coleman and Tyler Johnson back at center, and then Barclay Goodrow. And then the fourth line was kind of that line that had so much success at the end of October, and then going into Sweden with Patty Maroon, Cedric Paquette, and Yanni Gourde. So 4 really, really good-looking lines for the Lightning there, and I think even when Stamkos gets back, it's going to be even tougher. And then you look at that, and you don't have Verhaeghe, you don't have Stevens. Like, those are guys that had quite an impact for the Lightning. As we were going into the pause, they played really well for the Lightning, and those guys, they can't get into the lineup right now, or at least it looks like they're not going to be a part of those 4 lines, because there's just so much talent right now amongst the forward group with the Lightning. And then the defensive pairs, that was something I was pretty curious to watch, at least on this first day of camp, because we wondered if they were going to go back to like kind of what the pairs were when everybody was healthy. And that's kind of what we saw. They had the defensemen kind of broken down into, 5 on one session, 5 in the other. But we saw Jan Ruda with Victor Hedman back in that, first pair where he was before he missed those 17 games with a lower body injury. We saw Coburn and Bogosian as a second pair in that first group, and that was a pretty burly-looking defensive pairing. Both those guys had considerable size, and I wouldn't want to go head-to-head with either one of those guys. And then with the second group, it was more of like what we've seen. It was McDonough and Chernak. It was Sergachev with Shattenkirk. So it looks like, at least initially – got the dogs going there in the background. But it looked, at least initially, that they're going back to those defensive pairings that we saw when the Lightning were kind of playing their best hockey, when they went on that 23-2-1 stretch from like late December to mid-February, where it was Hedman, Ruda, McDonough, Chernak, Shattenkirk, and Sergachev.
Right. And a good problem to have if you're John Cooper, obviously the depth that they have both up front and now on the back end with a completely healthy decor, which is what they did not have. A little scary for them, injury stricken going into what would have been the playoffs in March. So obviously great to have everybody back on the ice. Steven Stamkos expected, like you mentioned, I think on Twitter too, in time for the round robin, but he's a full participant, still doing his rehab and dryland work off the ice, getting obviously some opportunity at the first day of training camp to get back on the ice. Just lastly, Bernsey, to kind of wrap it up, I guess you mentioned John Cooper and kind of what he wanted training camp to be like, what his expectations were for day one. What does he expect kind of moving forward and trying to bring this group together and sort of get back to the kind of hockey they were playing during that stretch you mentioned, where in a 26-game span, they went from 6th in their division to 2nd overall in the league standings?
Yeah, it was interesting. I thought Coop had a pretty good quote. Someone asked him if he got what he expected out of this first day, and he said, "I didn't really know what to expect from this first day. I just knew going in that I wanted to leave the arena and feel pretty good about where we were and how the team looked from that first day." And from that standpoint, he felt really good about what they were able to do. I think, more than anything, this was just getting everybody back together, kind of reacclimating, kind of setting the groundwork for what they expect from them over these next 2 weeks, setting the groundwork for the systems that they'll be running, and just kind of getting their legs back underneath of them. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it's just going to be a process where it's just kind of slowly, day by day, just kind of building on what they were able to do the day before. But if you look at the schedule, on Wednesday they have an inter squad scrimmage already set up. They've got 2 scrimmages set up for the following week. So I think pretty quickly we'll see the intensity start to ramp up, and especially once you get into these scrimmage scenarios, we know how competitive these guys are. Once you get into any kind of situation where a score is being kept or there's a punishment for the team that loses, these guys don't like to lose. They don't want to be on the wrong end of that scoreboard. So I think you'll see that intensity ramp up pretty quickly, and I think a lot of that will come once we get into these scrimmage scenarios.
Yeah, just in addition to the physical play, a mental hurdle, it's going to be a challenge physically, too, to get back into that competitiveness that you talked about. And it's why they have those exhibition games as well scheduled before the play-in games. So a lot to watch. Bernsey, thanks for joining me socially distanced from Amalie Arena while I'm in Chicago. But it was great catching up, and we look forward to continuing to see you update us with all the lines and news from Amalie Arena all week at training camp. And Lightning fans, stay tuned for another breakdown coming later this week as we look and see where the Lightning go and kind of how things align before it's time to go to the bubble.
Yeah, great to see you, Caley. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Bernsey.